For as long as I can remember, Sonic has been one of my favorite fictional characters ever created. I've been loving this little dude since the classic Sonic games. The TV shows were such a blast, which I always felt like both the games and TV shows really nailed his carefree personality for the most part. Now obviously the Citizen Kane of Sonic games, which were the Sonic Adventure Battle series. And I pretty much played all Sonic games. I mean, I know it's like blacklisted, but I even enjoyed Sonic Riders and Sonic and the Black Knight. The soundtracks for all Sonic media was absolutely peak, and I still listen to those songs every now and then. All this to say, Sonic was extremely influential during my formative years, and a couple years back they finally brought the Blue Scarlet to the big screen. And although there was quite a lot of turbulence during production and creative design of him, which was a bit horrifying in and of itself, I felt like the final look on him satisfied most people. And more importantly, one of the most imperative things they had to nail down about this character in the movie is his carefree spirit. Ultimately, to me, it didn't really matter all that much how he looked, as long as they were able to capture that essence of his core being. Yes, the movie was meant to be targeting younger audiences, and in general, it felt like a testing ground to see if it would be successful, since we know historically, video game adaptations never translate well on the big screen. With that being said, I think while not perfect, this series has been successful at both being a solid series of movies that get better and better with each entry, as well as successfully showing reverence for the Sonic universe and its characters. I love that these movies are faithful to Sonic's core values, because with that in check, these movies are always a good time, in spite of some issues. And I love that these movies honestly feel like they're all a part of the same universe, with a progressive immersion, and no new information ever feels like it shouldn't be present. Sonic 2's introduction of Tails and Knuckles was a welcome one, because not only was it a better, more entertaining film than the first one, but it also felt more confident that it could try more bolder ideas and more occurrences of Sonic lore. The introduction of Knuckles was awesome, Tails immediately being the most helpful dude on the planet is so fitting, and Jim Carrey's Eggman being as sinister and deliciously malevolent as ever is just the icing on the cake. The Echidna and Sonic origins felt like they added more motive and texture to the story, and if anything, it made the movies that much more engaging. The outlier in these films really was the human stuff, in particular that stupid wedding scene in Sonic 2 with Morgan from Criminal Minds. I just don't feel like the humans ever add anything to the story. They just feel like padding to not need to make more scenes with the main cast, since obviously that would be much more expensive. But now, the trials and tribulations of the first two movies have led us to Sonic 3, and boy does it deliver. They dialed in for sure on this third installment. The aura of this movie just felt so epic, and even though the spotlight of the movie goes to Keanu Reeves' Shadow, the movie itself feels like a fully realized Sonic movie straight out of a fan's dream. Especially when considering how Gen 1, the first Sonic movie, looked, because again, it was just a beta ground for what was to come. It's endearing and cute to see how it started, and had the fans not shown up to buy a ticket to tell Paramount, we want more Sonic, we wouldn't be here where they really smashed it. As a Sonic fan, these movies just instinctively make you want to use your primal monkey brain and like point and clap at certain moments, and this movie does it that much more than the first two movies. We also live in a time where CGI gets constantly criticized and bashed on because our eyes are trained to notice the imperfections and awkward look on certain things, but I think even the most cynical person would agree that all the characters look fantastic in this film. Really only the rating harming this movie, because a lot of the hits they felt very soft or like they barely made contact, because again, it is a kids movie with the exception of the third act, but that's just something minor. And again, this movie at the end of the day is a kids movie, so the story here isn't anything groundbreaking. It's really just Sonic and the gang living their life in Green Hill when Shadow shows up in a place that looks very familiar, by the way, and about obliterates them in combat, and so they have to find a way to beat him. And that's literally the plot of the last movie. A new guy shows up who's hella strong, and Sonic has to find a way to beat him. And listen, I don't mean to say that as a bad thing. Hell, Dragon Ball is one of my favorite shows ever, and that plot has been recycled about 1,000 times. And that series is still going, and it's beloved. R.I.P. Akira Toriyama. I mean it more in the fact that you don't always need a complex, intricate story to explore engaging themes while still having an entertaining movie. I'm not gonna deny that I'm biased, since I know the lore of Sonic, and knowing Shadow was gonna enter the franchise made me nervous if they were going to either just introduce him and not bring along his baggage, stage and just use him as an antagonist, which would have been fine, I guess. Or if they were gonna do his background story and not do it properly, since it's pretty dark for a kid's movie. A lot was riding on this element to the movie because of his origin and his ties to the past being so fundamental to the character of Shadow. It's a part of the essence of what makes him who he is. Dealing with grief and loss is a staple of the character, and some would argue that is the literal point of the character. It's a weight that Shadow has to carry with him, and I love that they were able to intertwine that theme of loss with the rest of this movie. The light shines even though the star is gone. Kind of a thesis statement about how the past weighs on the present and future. It's so good. And I'm over the moon that they did justice to Shadow's bond with Maria. And that seminal moment was depicted with as much emotional weight as you would have hoped for. And on the topic of emotional weight, this movie is probably the most emotional of the three films. Sonic's outcome in life with the chips he was dealt with, while he found a new home, he also suffered loss in Longclaw and his original home. Eggman dealing with his internal struggle of finding comfort and loyalty in others outside of himself. And yet somehow, while this movie had a lot of strong themes at play, it still balanced it with plenty of levity and fun action sequences. I mean, Shadow having his gun and the amount of splash shots that we got of referencing Sonic media was just so cool. And now more than ever, there were so many team sequences between Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles where it wasn't very effective on the offense, but on defense, when it came to saving their own asses, it was really helpful. And because the bond of a team was so important in this movie, I really do like that the movie took time to teach Sonic that he can't do everything by himself and that he has to trust his team. And I absolutely loved the confrontation between Knuckles and Sonic when it came to the Master Emerald, because Knuckles in these movies, he kind of becomes like the dumb jock role, but there he acted like a true friend. And in terms of humans, they had a lot less screen time, yet somehow they made more of an impact in this movie. Like the fact that I was invested in Agent Stone's story baffled me. But the one who is obviously the star of the show and kind of has been in these movies by far is Jim Carrey's Eggman. He's so goofy and energetic, and he doesn't let up in any of these movies. He's probably the most consistent character in this franchise, and I love it. Sure, he might get a little too carried away at times, a bit Nicolas Cage-esque, but that's fine, it works in the context of the movie. My only thing about his role here that I found a bit odd is that he acquiesces way too quickly to Gerald for so long in the story, but in the context of the movie, it makes sense because he's trying to cling to the only family he had, not knowing he has such a strong bond already with Agent Stone, so it's fine, it doesn't really pull me out of the story. And honestly, his dance sequence with Gerald was surprisingly entertaining, maybe because it was way shorter than the dance sequence in the second movie with Tails and Sonic, but the choreography was really good and it felt kinetic. Personally, I'd say my only complaints with the film are that while they nailed the more emotionally taxing moments, they went a bit too overboard on the comedy, a lot of tongue-in-cheek jokes, and that's consistent with the other two movies, I guess, so it's not new news. It's more of a byproduct of the fact that ultimately this is a movie geared towards younger audiences. This is just something that had to be accepted due to that nature. And Keanu Reeves' line deliveries sometimes felt a bit flat. Yeah, all these movies have flaws, of course, but you can look past them because all three movies felt like they're made by people that care. They know the material and they know what people want to see on screen. This series is one of the rare instances where it really does feel like the studio and creative team really listen to the feedback and therefore give a product that's better and better each time. But then it happened. What really sets this movie ahead of the first two films is the last act of this movie. Oh my god, they freaking did it. They adapted the conclusion of Sonic Adventure Battle 2 into the movie. Along with some creative imagery during the battle itself, jaw dropped on the floor for the entire last 30 minutes. Absolutely stunning. They did the Live and Learn soundtrack. They highlighted the removal of the gauntlets for Shadow. They just poured so much love onto fans for the entire last act. It's just absolutely epic. Even though I'm biased, I was at a loss of words of how good it was. Not to mention the cameos of Metal Sonic and Amy. It was just insane. And if they keep this formula up, they have an extremely strong franchise in this, since in my opinion, they're batting 3 for 3 on this. But that's it for me. I'd appreciate a thumbs up, subscribe, and sincerely yours, Anthony.